Hey everyone, Isabel Fox here. At 18, I stepped into a brothel for the first time and got paid $155 an hour. Within 3 years, by age 21, I was making $2,000 an hour and had become Australia's highest charging escort. Then at 25, I started a corporate business, and 2 years later, when I was 27, did an 8-figure private equity deal where I sold the majority shareholding. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through how I did it, with the goal that you can take the lessons and you can apply it to your own life. I'm no longer a working escort, so as I go, I'll explain how I used the job to catapult me into the next phase of my life, how I dealt with societal stigma along the way, and what I'm up to now. The idea to become an escort got planted in my mind when I saw the show Secret Diary of a Call Girl at age 15. I moved out of home and got a job with the government when I was 17, and I just remember hating my life. I would wake up and get the train into the government department and would literally count the seconds till it hit 5 p.m. so I could leave and get out of there. When I turned 18, I really wanted to give escorting a try. But I had a boyfriend at the time and I knew he'd never be okay with the job, and I didn't want to break up with him or do it behind his back, so I waited. But we did break up a few months after my 18th birthday anyway, and then 2 weeks later I was in a brothel doing my first shift. I earned $1,000 cash in 6 hours, which is more than what I made doing 40 hours a week with the government at the time, and it is still to this day the most exciting money I have ever made. Not because of the amount. Today, $1,000 isn't enough to get me out of bed, but because it was my first real taste of self-employment, an experience in being able to exercise any level of control over my financial freedom. I came from very humble financial beginnings. Money was always a struggle growing up, and up until then, I'd only ever worked for other people. And so it was other people who determined what I was worth and how many hours they would pay me for. As a working girl in a brothel, you're basically self-employed. You get paid based on the amount of jobs you book. It is commission-only sales effectively. And I think the most important thing I learned working in a brothel, which I'm just so thankful for because it's served me so well in every area of my life since, is lesson number 1, get good at selling. When you work in a brothel, customers come in all day and choose between you and 20 or more other girls. You only get paid if they pick you. That means if no one picks you, you're essentially just working for free. By the way, I was by no means the most attractive girl available. I wasn't the skinniest, the prettiest, I didn't have the biggest boobs, I had braces, size B breasts, and I was plain Jane average. Some of the women working in the brothel I was at literally could have been supermodels. So if I wanted to make any money at all, I had to figure out how to stand out beyond my appearance. Now, the cool thing about selling, like all skills, is it can be learned. All you need to do is decide you're committed to getting better at it no matter what. Practice in the real world lots of times, meaning you can't just read 20 books about it. Pay attention to what works and what doesn't, and modify your approach accordingly. Input almost always equals output. When you do something lots of times, you almost always can't help but get better at it. So if you're escorting right now and you're not getting enough work, it's most likely because you don't know how to sell, whether that be in person or online. If you're in a situation like you're working for an agency where you have zero control over how many new clients come to see you and pick you, I recommend you get out of there as soon as you have the basic practicalities of the job down pat. In a brothel, even though I couldn't control how many clients came in the door, I could control how many picked me by becoming better at making a good first impression than anyone else. When a client walked in the door, I had at best 5 minutes with him to convince him to give his money to me. This is almost totally cold sales. Some of the most successful people in the world started off doing cold sales, like Sarah Blakely, self-made billionaire and founder of the company Spanx. In her early 20s, she was selling fax machines door to door. So, escorts. Never make the mistake of thinking your skills aren't legitimate, valuable, or transferable to other professions. Later in this video, you'll hear how I cold called and pitched to hundreds of investors to acquire funding for my corporate business. It is thanks to working in the sex industry that I first learned this skill. Now, after that first night in the brothel, I very quickly quit my government job where most people waited at least 2 years to beg for like a 10 to 20% pay rise, and I immediately tripled my income. I really wish I could say at this point that I went full-time into brothel work, because if I had of, I would have quintupled, 5x'd my income, but I didn't. Instead, I worked on average 2 or 3 nights at the brothel and got a job in a gym to become a PT. I wanted to use the brothel earnings to help me kickstart a PT business and planned on leaving the adult industry for good within 12 months. Here's what actually happened. As a PT, I made at most $80 an hour. Not bad for an 18-year-old. But because I could make $155, basically double, escorting, I just wasn't financially motivated enough to really give PT my all. I always had a safety net. It didn't really matter if I got many PT clients or not, because I knew I could just do a shift at the brothel and make double whatever I would have made anyway, and with far more ease. Basically, failing to make my PT business work carried very little consequences. So here's where the second lesson comes in. Having a safety net leads to more loss than gain. Too often, I speak to escorts who want to change their lives, but aren't willing to let go of their safety nets, whatever they may be. A civilian job, other sources of income within the industry, or the investment of the savings they do have to create bigger and better options for themselves. And this is just like me when I was a PT. I said I wanted a successful PT business, but my inability to let go of what was at the time fast, easy, and comfortable income in a brothel meant I could never succeed. Because I just wasn't ever sufficiently financially motivated to put in the hard yards to be all I could be. Instead, I coasted along in both professions for a while, never achieving greatness in either business and not moving forward. Basically, I was comfortable, and the sacrifice for that comfort were my dreams. After most escorts achieve basic financial stability, maybe for the first time in their lives, like me, naturally they typically want to achieve more, like all humans, of course. But also because of the actual job we do, having sex for money. All the stigma, hardship, and physical toll we endure, few people want to do this job in exchange for a normal life. Most of us, myself included, do it because we want to experience a quality of lifestyle that just can't be attained working a normal 9 to 5. Otherwise, why bother? Why have sex for money just to live normally when you could be in the civilian world stigma-free and live the same way? But for a few months, I coasted like this. There's a saying in business which I think applies to life. If you aren't growing, you're dying. I wasn't growing, financially or otherwise, and as a consequence, it felt like my spirit and dreams were dying. Because they were. I looked at where I was after a few months and realized that the true dreams I had, the actual reason I got into the adult industry, to achieve financial freedom and escape the poverty I grew up in, to have enough money to buy a house, travel, and retire young on some kind of passive income, was so unrealistic, it was actually laughable. I remember just doing some basic math based on what I had saved and hearing a quote from a wealthy person which said, "No one ever saved their way to wealth," and knowing I was fucked. I had to admit that what I was doing wasn't working. Was it hard? Technically, practically, no. But what was utterly soul-destroying was looking at my situation and knowing that I was locked into waking up every day and doing what I was doing indefinitely, like forever, because I wasn't making enough to get ahead. I couldn't survive financially on the earnings of my PT business, and I was physically capped in my escorting due to my commitments as a PT. At this point, I had to make a decision to either go all in on my PT business or all in as an escort. Truthfully, it should have been a decision which took me all of 30 seconds to make. I knew what I wanted to do. I had experienced PT long enough to know I was passionate about training myself but not other people, and I was way too financially ambitious to be willing to walk away from escorting income. And yet, I wasted precious, unrecoverable time agonizing over the decision for months. Why? Because of lesson number 3, unacknowledged fear is the silent dream killer. Now, I never went to university, but I was brainwashed well enough with conventional thinking that sitting down and making a pros and cons list for all the good and bad reasons to pick one option over the other felt like the right thing to do. This was again a waste of time. If you sit with yourself quietly, most of us know the things we're yearning for that we really want out of life. Most of us have big dreams we're too afraid to admit to ourselves for fear they won't come true. My dream at this point was that I wanted to escort full-time. I knew I wanted to fulfill what I felt was my full potential and make it to the top of the industry. Escorting was a vehicle I had found which I believed could take me to financial freedom. I knew I wanted to live a life like I'd seen Belle de Jour living on Secret Diary of a Call Girl back when I was 15. I knew all these things. What held me back was fear. Fortunately for me, I had a very wise, non-judgmental, and unconventional mentor at the time, who I could sit down with and have a real conversation. I count myself ridiculously lucky to have had this back then, because many people in the adult industry don't have barely even a single person they can speak to who knows what they do, let alone experienced, non-judgmental mentors who genuinely support them in their chosen profession. So my mentor sat me down and asked me to be honest about what was really holding me back. I had all the usual smoke screens and bullshit lies we tell ourselves about all the rational reasons I should choose PT over escorting. I'd actually been offered a full-time job at the best gym in my city, working with successful business people in the fitness industry at the time. And I felt it was such a good opportunity, no sensible person would dare pass it up. But this, along with all the other reasons I listed, was just noise. The real truth was that I was scared of the stigma associated with becoming a full-time sex worker. In my mind, as long as I had a conventional job of some kind, I could say escorting was just a side hustle. And this mattered to me because I was terrified no man would ever accept me or love me as a professional escort. This is kind of ironic, because I'd had serious relationships during this time with partners who actually knew what I did, yet still, I felt some part of them only accepted it and thought it was okay because it was helping me to finance another normal business. What it really took was me saying this out loud, acknowledging the fear, being honest with myself about it, and deciding if I really wanted to be a person who lived my life making decisions based on fear. Or, at the minimum, at least be willing to be someone who gave overcoming my fears a try. Now, you know you've identified a true fear, a core fear, when it makes you feel sick to say out loud. I said this out loud to my mentor, felt like I was going to throw up, and in that moment I knew what I had to do. I simply had to refuse to be willing to let the opportunity of fulfilling my potential in this industry pass me by no matter what. I still remember going for a walk that night and making the solemn promise to myself that if I had to stay single and forego a romantic life until I got to where I wanted to be, then I would. To some people, this might not be a big deal, but for me, it was. It was a big sacrifice, but one of my favorite sales coaches, Brian Tracy, always says, you have to be willing to pay the price up front and in advance. And so that's what I decided to do. I left the fitness industry and went all in on escorting. I was 19, almost 20. Now, side note, like most fears that hold people back, my fear of not being accepted or loved by a man because of my job was completely unfounded. During my 6 years as a working escort, I had 3 serious relationships with men who knew what I did and who, aside from my job, I had serious monogamous relationships with. I also dated a couple of people who I told on either our second or third date about my profession who were fine with it. Okay, so what happened next was I went full-time at the brothel I was at. Again, I wish I could say it was here I went out on my own as a fully independent escort, but I didn't. Once again, I stayed within my little comfort zone and spent my time in between clients Googling independent escorts, being blown away by how much they were charging, which was between $500 to $1,000 an hour, and then not doing much about it. Until one day, a regular client I had who was a semi-famous Australian athlete who I respected and admired because of his status said to me, "What are you doing here? You should be doing this professionally with your own website and stuff." Now, of course, I'd thought about doing just that 1,000 times, but I didn't really believe I was good enough until someone else told me so. So lesson number 4 is believe in what you can become so you can become it. If I could go back in time to my younger self and inject myself with anything, it would be copious amounts of self-belief. When I coach fellow escorts now, this is always fundamentally what holds them back from realizing their full potential. In their heart of hearts, they just don't believe they can be more than what they are, or earn more than what they're earning, or live the life they really want to be living. This is not unique to sex work, it's human nature, and it can be reprogrammed. This one comment was like a shot of belief, which thankfully set me on the right path. I basically just decided to stop only looking at all these escorts I wanted to be like, and to start doing whatever I needed to become like them. I reached out to escort after escort trying to get some advice, and Estelle Lucas was the only one who got back to me. Pretty much, I figured that the best way to become someone like Estelle was just to meet her and copy everything she was doing. And this is a principle I still follow today. Anytime I want to learn something or get good at it, I just find the best possible living example of it, who I can get in contact with, try to get time with them, including paying any price I need to pay, and I do everything they're doing. It might not sound very original or creative, but it works. Way too often, escorts I work with overcomplicate things. At first, keep it simple. Copy the best, because there's a very good chance it will work for you, given it is already working for someone else. Then get creative and do things differently later. The problem with lack of belief is it's very hard to believe in something you can't see or have never experienced. Routinely, escorts come to me making 5K or less a month, wanting things to be better, but not really believing they can be, until I drop them into a community of other escorts making on average 20K a month and higher, and their perspective changes because they see what's possible. That is why total immersion in the thing you want to be or the life you want to live is so important. You basically need to trick your brain into believing something can be true due to simple, repeated exposure. This is also why athletes so regularly talk about visualizing the win and doing affirmations. If you tell yourself something over and over and over again, the brain will begin to believe it's true. At first, you might struggle to do this and need to meet other people in the flesh who are ahead of you. But if you want to become a real pro at this, you need to be able to believe in something no one else has ever achieved or conceived of before. Like Elon Musk when he accomplishes literally the impossible and does things like sends reusable rocket ships into outer space. Okay, so here I was out in the private escort world working for myself, doing what everyone else was doing, and naturally I hit the same ceiling and experienced the same problems everyone else was facing. I was charging about $700 an hour, getting work sometimes but not consistently, dealing with time wasters and low quality clients, getting predominantly 1 hour and short notice bookings, and trying but failing to regularly grow my income month on month. This is when I met my second mentor, and he entered my life and taught me real business skills and knowledge for the very first time. Like how to craft and sell a premium offer so I could stand out among the ever-growing sea of other escorts entering the market. How to increase my rates systematically like all businesses do. How to manage money, and just how to, in general, approach what I was doing like a business owner, rather than a solo operator providing a service. This mentorship is what got me to increase my rates to $2,000 an hour, making me the highest charging escort in Australia at the time. I was 21. So, lesson number 5, escorts, is realize you're running a business, not just providing a service. When the world tells you in all kinds of direct and indirect ways that you and your profession aren't ethical or legitimate, this can be hard to absorb. But we need to get good at tuning out the opinion of others, trusting ourselves, and being selective about who we allow into our lives. I was extremely fortunate to meet this mentor. He was a successful business owner outside the adult industry, who was again open-minded and truly supportive of what I wanted to do. He taught me to think about and value my time, as well as practical skills on how to increase its value using various business strategies. After I got my rates to $2,000 an hour, friends of mine in the industry noticed and I started to help them. My mentor also pointed out to me that as long as my income was based upon me providing a physical service, it would always be limited and incapable of being scaled, because I was just one person with only 24 hours in a day. He helped me to transition into escort mentorship at 22, and at 24 I had grown that business enough to completely replace my escorting income, and I stopped seeing clients for good. Now, by this point, I was thoroughly in love with and passionate about the adult industry and working with the people in it. Not because of the sex part. I am conventionally normal sexually, but because I believe in a person's right to choose what they do with their body and their life and to live on their own terms, provided they aren't hurting anybody. Just like I believe in free speech, provided it doesn't incite violence or harm. I also really love escorts and adult industry workers. Of all the industries I've worked in, they are hands down my favorite people. Contrary to common uninformed opinions, escorts are just normal people trying to support themselves and their families and get ahead in the world. They also tend to be incredibly tenacious, gutsy, ballsy, self-sufficient, entrepreneurial, caring. Escorting is very much a people-caring profession, and hardworking. Now that all I do is talk to escorts all day, every day, I have never been happier. So I knew my place was in the adult industry, and I wanted to take my mentorship and do it on a larger scale, to create the support and opportunity for learning that I wished I had had when I started in the job at 18. I was also pretty financially ambitious and had multi-million-dollar plans for myself, which required business scale to achieve. I actually wanted to, and I tried to open my own brothel. It was going to be called Isabel's. Not very creative, I know. I wanted to create a space where industry workers could go and be treated well and taught real business skills, in a safe and uplifting environment surrounded by like-minded people. Unfortunately, the red tape surrounding opening a brothel was incredibly hard to navigate. During my research, I met with licensing officials and industry advocates. I even considered buying a brothel, but none of these options felt like a fit or like they would actually be successful. I learnt that most new brothel applications got rejected. And buying brothels isn't cheap, I just didn't have the capital. So off I went in search of a new mentor, internationally this time, who could help me figure out this challenge. When you work in the adult industry, lots of people turn you down. I will elaborate on how I navigated and overcame stigma later. I approached lots of business coaches and coaching communities in Australia and internationally, and either got turned away or just couldn't find what I was looking for. I finally met a guy in Europe who had close to billionaire status who was willing to help me. It cost me $60K. Here's lesson number 6. Your dreams will come true as long as you're flexible about how it happens. When I started working with this guy, I thought he was going to help me open a brothel or something like that. I was wrong. It turned out he had made his money starting and selling corporate businesses. The first day I worked with him, he told me if I really wanted to be successful, I had to close my business and leave the industry behind for now. He said, make money first, then do the dream second. Naturally, I procrastinated and didn't listen right away, but eventually I followed his advice. I started on my corporate business idea at 25. Sometimes you meet people in life that you just feel have been sent to this planet from outer space, and this was one of those guys. He pretty much challenged and disagreed with all conventional wisdom and business advice that I'd ever heard. I learnt so much from him. I would need an entire video of its own just to convey it all succinctly. But this is what impacted me most. Lesson number 7. We underestimate what we're capable of, how hard we can work, and how much we can push ourselves. This was the kind of guy who preached 100-hour weeks, and he meant it. He also didn't care that I hadn't been to uni, didn't care that I used to be a sex worker, didn't care that I was female or young, didn't care that I didn't know what business terms like P&L meant. He just believed that anyone can be successful if they take aggressive, continuous, high-volume action. He also didn't really believe in coaching or mentorship, at least not in the traditional sense. His coaching approach was to give me a very rough business blueprint, then push me out into the business world and say, you figure it out. And he meant it. From that point, when I did ask him for help, he either didn't respond or just told me to stop focusing on problems and make it work. This was by far the hardest 2 years of my life, and I have never worked harder. But I also learned more than ever and at a rapid pace. And as cruel as his no support approach felt at the time, it worked. It is amazing how innovative, dynamic, and resourceful you can be when you just have no choice and you have no one to rely on but yourself. 2 years later, countless meltdowns, panic attacks, unsolvable problems, catastrophic challenges, and 403 cold calls to investors alone, I did what I had set out to do. An 8-figure private equity deal. I was 27. Now, going into the corporate world was very much not part of my plan. Being in the conventional lane was never really my cup of tea, but I'm so glad I did. Because I'd been in the adult industry since I was 18, I had no idea the kind of business resources, information, and support which is so rampantly available to conventional industries, and at a really high level and of good quality. I was very fortunate to spend the next 3 years in this business, working closely with super smart people who knew how to do things like use Excel spreadsheets, who knew and understand money and wealth creation, and how to build and scale businesses. I learned so much I can't even put a price tag on it. And so it was here I got to experience all the things I felt our industry was missing to make it a professional, legitimate, and safe place to work for all adult industry workers. Which brings me to where I am and what I am up to today. Now I'm 30, and what I'm doing is trying to change the adult industry from the inside out. Something else I learned from my European mentor, due to his insistence that I do everything on my own, is that no one is coming to save you. No one is responsible for changing your life but you. And so us industry workers have to do this for ourselves from the inside. It is not the world's job to support what we do. It is not society's responsibility to fix our problems for us or to approve. We have to do this for ourselves by banding together, by holding ourselves to higher standards, by working hard, learning, sharing that knowledge with each other, and by being active participants in a supportive and uplifting community for our fellow industry workers. I'm going to throw a super cliched, warm and fuzzy quote in here from old mate Gandhi. Be the change you wish to see in the world. If we want to experience more, we need to be more for ourselves first. At the business I run now, Escort Academy, that's what escorts on the inside are doing, becoming the best version of themselves. Not because they need to prove anything to the outside world. This isn't about other people. If people disapprove of us and what we are doing, that's okay. That is their right. If we want to have the choice and the right to believe in what we believe and what we want to do, provided we don't harm others, other people need to have the right to do the same. Escort Academy is about empowerment, learning the skills we need to learn to live our best life on our own terms, respecting, supporting, and connecting with our fellow industry workers, being all we can be, and making more money than we have ever made before. Basically, I work one-on-one with my students, teaching them everything I've learned so they can maximize their success in the industry and get out of it what they got into it to achieve, like to make more money than they ever thought was possible before. That's right, if you're an escort listening to this now, I know how much you love to make money, and I think that's awesome. Money is a vital resource which can help you to transform your life and the lives of the people around you. Now, a word on societal stigma, which very much exists. At every step in this journey, I met plenty of people, and still do, who didn't approve of what I was doing. And like I said, that's okay. If we want the right to be who we want to be, we have to extend that right and really believe it to others. I'm so happy and grateful to live in a place where that's possible. Even if you're in a place right now where sex work specifically isn't legal, and therefore you're a companion, isn't it so great that you can be a companion and exchange your time for compensation, provided you operate within certain boundaries relatively safely? There are certainly many places in the world right now where that isn't the case, where people can't even speak their opinions without risking serious harm to themselves and their families. So, first and foremost, we need to be grateful for what we have, rather than focusing on the challenges that we face. Adult industry worker or not, we all have challenges. Escorts are not the only people who experience stigma. Stigma is really not that unique. Think of all the intolerance and prejudice and poor treatment certain races have had to and still do endure. One of my brothers is gay, and I tell you now, his life hasn't always been a walk in the park. Homophobia is still very much a real thing. I've got friends who are covered in tattoos, who experience stigma when they go to certain places. Or think about the people who first tried to legalize marijuana. Imagine the stigma they would have faced trying to make a change. We all deal with something. Our stigma doesn't make us special. In my experience, people are actually more open-minded than you think, and they care more about their own problems than what you're doing with your life. What they usually just don't want is to be publicly associated with what you do, which is kind of fair enough, right? I mean, why should they have to deal with adult industry stigma when they aren't even working the job? We know that better than anyone, don't we? But at least we get paid for it. So, try not to take it personally when people don't want to associate with you. Sometimes it's because they have an ethical problem with sex work. That's okay. And other times, they couldn't give a shit what you do, but they don't want to deal with the judgment that comes with publicly voicing that they don't care if you do sex work. When this happens, just move on. Life is a numbers game. Plenty of people have turned me down because they didn't want to work with me. And so I just kept asking people again and again for help until someone said yes, which they always did. The same applies to friends and relationships. Let's not worry about people who say no or why they say no. You just focus on the yes. At the end of the day, the most important yes really is the one you give to yourself. Say yes to only surrounding yourself with people who respect and support you. Say yes to investing in your success. Say yes to pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Say yes to having big dreams and pursuing them. And when all that is done, and you have accomplished more than you ever thought was possible, and your life is better than it is today, please remember to say yes to helping fellow industry workers who are where you once were. Lesson number 8 is, please say yes to giving back to the industry and our people in whatever way you can. Because that's how we can change our industry and make it a better place from the inside. so that no adult industry worker ever again has to walk this path alone. All right, so if you're an escort and you're lost and confused and trying to get ahead and wondering where to go next to make that happen, let's run through the 8 lessons I just shared with you, so you have an 8-point plan you can take away and start actioning today. Lesson number 1, get good at selling. The number 1 priority as an escort and your first order of business is to get paying clients. This is where I start with my students in Escort Academy. We need to become masters at getting clients to pay us. If you're struggling to do this right now, focus on learning how to sell above all else. Lesson 2, having a safety net leads to more loss than gain. Once you figure out how to sell and get clients, naturally you'll want to move ahead even more. So to do that, you'll need to let go of whatever safety nets you have which are keeping you comfortable but holding you back. That looks different for everyone. Figure out what yours are and decide to let them go. We need a level of pain and discomfort in order to grow. Lesson 3, unacknowledged fear is the silent dream killer. If you struggle to let go of your safety nets, and you will, you need to look at the core deep fear that's holding you back. As I shared, for me, it was the fear of not being loved and accepted by a man as a full-time professional escort. For you, it might be moving off the conventional path of a career you studied for, or defying family expectations of who you should be. We can't overcome fears till we have the courage to be honest with ourselves about them and speak them aloud. Once we do, very often they lose the strength of their hold over us and we can proceed beyond them. Lesson 4, believe in what you can become so you can become it. The opposite of fear is love, and I like to think of my biggest dreams as the greatest expression of love I have. So we need to replace fear with love for the life we want to live and the people we want to be. The truth is, you aren't that person living that life yet, but you need to believe you can become it in order for it to happen. This is hard. Self-doubt and negativity and insecurity will whisper to you that you're shit and inadequate and incapable, but you need to learn to shut that voice down. Find people who are living the life you want to be living. Immerse yourself in the vision of the future you have for yourself. Reprogram your mind to believe in what you can't see, and it will come true. Lesson 5, realize you are running a business, not just providing a service. At this point, you'll have developed the skill of attracting clients, have a level of repeatable income, and know how to provide a good service. Most escorts who care are good at what they do. But to move beyond solo operators, we need to learn business skills. To be the best, we need to act and operate like professionals. This means managing your money, managing your time, thinking about investing in your business in multiple ways to grow it month on month. To learn this, you can either seek out business mentors or read books or do courses and start applying the teachings to your business. When you do this well, not only will your income grow, but your ability and skill set to produce more and more money will get better too. Money is just a resource which opens more doors and gives us more opportunities to take us again to the next level. Lesson 6, your dreams will come true as long as you're flexible about how it happens. At no point along my journey did anything really happen how I initially thought it would. If I hadn't remained flexible and open to different ideas and opportunities, I never would have ultimately gotten where I ended up. Accept that you aren't where you want to be because you don't have the knowledge or the skills needed to get there yet. Whenever I met new mentors who were ahead of me, their advice was always radically different to what I thought I should be doing to get where I wanted to go. Escorts, another common trait of ours, is that we are often headstrong and stubbornly independent. I get that. You and me both. These are fantastic traits. Sometimes. But if you aren't where you want to be, it's because there's something you don't know. And so the current knowledge you possess inside your head isn't going to set you on a different path. Be open to new ideas and be willing to take risks and give new things a try. Now when mentors tell me things, I commit to giving them a go to my fullest at least once. Unless the possibility of death is on the table, just try. Because if you don't, you'll never know. And even if you do try and it doesn't work, I guarantee you'll learn valuable lessons along the way, which will help you much more than just sticking to the same old thing you were doing ever would anyway. Lesson 7. We underestimate what we're capable of, how hard we can work, and how much we can push ourselves. Before I met my European mentor, I shied away from working too long or too hard, due to 2 reasons. 1, because balance is an in thing right now, and 2, because it's hard work to do hard work. The reality is though, input equals output. If you reply to every text, take every booking, and make doing the work required to hit your dreams your highest priority for a period of time, you will move forward radically faster than you ever thought was possible. In 2 years, I started a corporate business from scratch in an industry I knew nothing about and sold it in an 8-figure deal. I attribute this solely to hard effort and hours worked. I wasn't smarter or more talented than anyone else, and I had basically no help. Remember, my mentor wouldn't even reply to my emails. I literally just worked longer and harder than I ever had before, and step by step it happened. Just know that you don't have to live this way forever. And yes, it's going to be a bit shit along the way. There will be sacrifice and you will feel tired, but you'll be okay. The leaps and bounds you'll take professionally and personally will put you streets ahead of everyone else. Plus, once you figure out how to press the button on what I like to call beast mode, you will have the confidence and competence to know you can do it again in the future anytime you want to hit a new goal and move ahead quickly. And lastly, lesson 8, give back to the industry and our people in whatever way you can. I'm constantly hearing how the industry is a competitive place and getting work is becoming harder and harder. In fact, I've heard it every year for the last almost 13 years now. The good news is, men who want to pay for a woman's time are not going away anytime soon. It is my guess that they have always and will always be there. There is plenty of work to go around. You don't need to make a career of helping other escorts like I have. But if a fellow escort hits you up via text to ask you a question, please just take a few minutes out of your day and reply. You have got nothing to lose. Industry workers are constantly complaining about stigma and lack of opportunities, but we can't expect how others treat us to change if we don't first change how we treat each other. Help your colleagues. Trust me, it feels good. If you're worried about anonymity, just contact them using the same method you use to contact random stranger clients who get in touch with you. Fear of discretion is not a viable excuse. Every one of us has valuable experience, knowledge, and support to share, which our fellow workers can benefit from. I am learning new things from my students every day, and it's great. Everybody talks about economies of scale, but what's really powerful are economies of knowledge. 2 heads are always better than 1. Imagine what we can do and how fast we can move if we all just band together and share our experience with one another. It may seem far-fetched, but that is my personal dream. As I am here sharing my knowledge freely with you, if it helps you, please pass it on by sharing your experiences freely with fellows you cross paths with or who reach out to you in the future. That way, the industry can be a better, safer, more supportive place for us all. Finally, if you're an escort listening to this, wherever you are in the world right now, I want you to know you are not alone. You are supported. I want to finish on sharing a very, very personal story with you. The first night I worked in a brothel at 18, I was shit scared. Before I went in, I stopped to call my mentor at the time, and they gave me a little pep talk that I sorely needed. Then, once I was inside, my phone rang. It was them calling me back, and this is what they said. I want you to know how proud I am of you for being someone who has the courage to go for your dreams, even when they're unconventional and other people don't approve. You can do this. So, provided you're doing this job because you genuinely want to be doing it, then I am proud of you for being someone who backs themselves on an unconventional path in order to live life how you want to live it. Sometimes we all just need a little love, encouragement, and support to help kickstart us in believing in ourselves. I am thankful to every friend, partner, colleague, mentor, family member, client, and human being who has done that for me over the years. And so now I want to pass it on to you. Whatever it is you want to achieve, I believe in you. You can do it. So that's all for this video. I hope it's helped. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. If you want to learn more escorting tips, just click the link below this video.